Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Richard Ryan, and I am Senior Washington Correspondent for the Detroit News and President of the National Press Club. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as of those of you who are watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio. The video archive of today's luncheon is provided by Connect Live and is available through the National Press Club website at npc.press.org. National Press Club luncheons are also carried live by many sites on the World Wide Web. Press Club members may also access transcripts of our luncheons at our website. Non-members may purchase transcripts, audio and videotapes by calling 1-888-343-1940. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our members of future speakers. On Thursday, March 8th, Queen Noor of Jordan will speak about her work with the Landmine Survivors Network. On Friday, March 9th, John Walsh, host of America's Most Wanted television program, will speak about constitutional rights for crime victims. And on Wednesday, March 21st, John Bogle, founder of the Vanguard Group, will be our guest at the Press Club. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards that are provided at your table there and pass them up to me, and I will ask as many as time permits. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. But please hold your applause until all head table guests are introduced. From your right and my left, Carl Hartman, Associated Press. Gay Alcorn, Sydney Morning Herald and Melbourne Age. Gil Klein, Media General News Service and a former president of the National Press Club. Janine Zakaria of the Jerusalem Post. Larry Bivens of the Gannett News Service and a member of the National Press Club Board of Governors. Sonia Bernhardt, publisher, the Georgetowner newspaper. And Alma Powell, vice chairman of the Kennedy Center Board of Governors. Frank Ockefer, chairman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee and a former president of the National Press Club. And skipping over our speaker for a moment, Doris Margolis, president, editorial associates, and National Press Club Speakers Committee member who organized today's luncheon. Thank you, Doris. Jim Johnson, chairman of the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts and the guest of our speaker. Eleanor Clift, Newsweek. Ken Duberstein, vice chairman of the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees. Catherine Edwards, Insight Magazine. And William McAllister of the Denver Post. It has been just 5 weeks since Michael Kaiser became president of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, America's official national performing arts center. During that brief span, he has unveiled far-reaching plans for this 30-year-old institution, the official memorial to former President John F. Kennedy. Already, he has landed a $50 million gift, the largest ever given the center, from Alberto Villar, a Cuban-born multimillionaire. The money will be used, in part, to fund a decade of visits to the Kennedy Center by the famed Russian Kirov Opera and Ballet. It's no secret that Mr. Kaiser has an ongoing love affair with the performing arts. Since earliest childhood, they have been a source of inspiration, entertainment, and delight. For many years, he has been striving to bring those life-enriching joys to as many people as possible. He has been instrumental in recent years in rescuing several performing arts institutions. His successes have earned him the title of the Turnaround King. First in line was the troubled Kansas City Ballet. Mr. Kaiser took over as general manager of the company in 1985. In short order, he erased its deficit and took the company to new heights of excellence. He reprised this role with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, the American Ballet Theater, and most recently, the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden in London. Mr. Kaiser also has served as a consultant to various arts organizations, including the Jewish Museum, the Market Theater in Johannesburg, the Detroit Symphony, and Glimmerglass Opera. Despite his litany of successes in this arts field, the most important thing he has done in his life, Mr. Kaiser will tell you, is donating a kidney to his sister, Susan, 13 years ago. Even though Mr. Kaiser has achieved nearly legendary success in the arts management field, it was not his first career choice. He actually wanted to be a performer, an operatic singer to be exact. Mr. Kaiser became interested in the theater when he was 4, and his mother took him to a matinee performance of The Music Man at Broadway's Majestic Theater. As a child, he also spent many Saturdays at Carnegie Hall watching his violinist grandfather rehearse with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. But as a teenager, Mr. Kaiser realized he did not have the talent to become a professional performer. He then turned his attention to management consulting. He earned a bachelor's degree in economics from Brandeis University and a master's degree in management from MIT. He went on to found his own consulting firm, Kaiser Associates, where he specialized in helping such large corporations as General Motors, Corning Glassworks, and IBM formulate strategic plans. He sold the company in 1985 to concentrate on arts management. The Kennedy Center now stands to benefit from Mr. Kaiser's skill, creativity, and experience in arts management. Even after all these years, Mr. Kaiser says he still loves the performing arts. I enjoy the artists themselves, he says. I also enjoy the moment when the curtain rises and the audience is pulled into a performance. I get great satisfaction from a happy audience. Well, Mr. Kaiser, I'm sure this audience will provide you with great satisfaction. Please join me in welcoming Michael Kaiser to the National Press Club.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dick. And I'd like to just acknowledge my board members who are here today on the dais: Jim Johnson, our chairman, Ken Duberstein, our vice chairman, and Alma Powell, also our vice chairman of the board. Thank you for being here today. It's a great honor to be here, and it's certainly a great honor to represent the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. The Kennedy Center is a remarkable national resource, offering over 3,000 performances annually by the world's greatest singers, dancers, actors, and musicians, and providing an astonishing array of educational programs to millions of children around the nation. Coming to the Kennedy Center as its new president is both a great honor and something of a homecoming for me. 16 years ago, I was living in Washington, running my own management consulting business, and serving on the board of the Washington Opera. I was perhaps the worst board member in history, involving myself in decisions that belonged solely with the staff and making a general nuisance of myself. While the staff was patient with me, I knew I was acting improperly, and I realized that I was getting overly involved because I really wanted to run an arts organization, not serve on its board. After a great deal of soul searching, I sold my business and looked for a job in the arts. Through a consulting client, I was introduced to the leadership of the Kansas City Ballet, a wonderful small company in Missouri that was close to bankruptcy. Like most troubled arts organizations, cash was scarce, morale was low, and the board and staff were blaming each other. Troubled arts organizations all behave alike. The board and the staff spend all of their time looking backward, trying to identify the culprit and trying to measure the size of the problem. More important, they try to save their way to health by cutting back on the areas which are the easiest to cut: new art and marketing. Unfortunately, artistic initiatives and marketing are the two things that create interest among donors and audience members. So cutting back tends to exacerbate the problem. Less art and marketing yielding less money, yielding less art and marketing, yielding less money, and so on and so on. A vicious cycle is created that is hard to escape. I discovered an antidote in Kansas City. marshal all one's resources, and devote them to art and marketing. This tends to generate a bit more revenue. Take that new revenue and continue to invest in new art and marketing, and a positive reinforcing cycle replaces the vicious cycle. And by marketing, I don't mean more ads or brochures. I mean high-profile events and activities that create media buzz. I practiced this approach in Kansas City, and then at the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, and then at American Ballet Theater, and then at the Royal Opera House Covent Garden. In each case, important arts organizations that did wonderful work were about to go bankrupt, and in each case, the deficits were now erased. Sid Smith of the Chicago Tribune dubbed me the turnaround king, but I was simply a part of a tremendous team at each of these organizations. I worked with inspirational artistic leaders like Todd Bolander and Judith Jamison, Kevin McKenzie and Sir Anthony Dowell, and Bernard Haitink. I worked alongside board members and staff who were remarkably skilled and dedicated. But while the cast of characters changed, the prescription did not. Great art, supported by aggressive marketing, worked in every context. By the time I decided to leave London, I figured I had learned enough about what makes a sick organization healthy. It was time for me to work in an organization that does not require a fiscal fix. So here I am back in Washington, 16 years older and hopefully wiser. And what am I focusing on at the Kennedy Center? Investing in great art and marketing. Just last week, we announced next season's programming for the Kennedy Center, and what a season it will be. We will inaugurate the first of 10 years of residences by the Cure of Opera and Ballet, thanks to the remarkable generosity of Alberto Villar. We will host the Kirov, Bolshoi, Cuban, and Joffrey ballets, along with American Ballet Theater and the Dance Theater of Harlem. The National Symphony Orchestra has a remarkable season, with no fewer than 7 premieres and 3 festivals. Our jazz program will be highlighted by the 80th birthday extravaganza for Dr. Billy Taylor. And our theater program will include an historic Stephen Sondheim Festival with new productions of 6 of his works. The guiding theme behind all of this programming is to make the Kennedy Center a destination, not simply a place to visit if one is in Washington anyway. Washington is certainly a destination when it comes to the visual arts. The National Gallery, the Corcoran, the Hirshhorn, the Phillips, not to mention the many branches of the Smithsonian, bring hordes of people to this city. These are organizations that function at the top of their fields, and everyone in the world knows it. I think we must be honest and acknowledge that the performing arts in the city, including the Kennedy Center, have yet to reach this status. We are working well to please the local community, but we have yet to affect the rest of the nation and the world. We have not created an image for the district as a performing arts destination. When tourists plan a trip to Washington, they may end up at the Kennedy Center, but chances are they didn't make the trip for that reason. It's an afterthought, an add-on. We know that all this great theater and music and dance is here, but outside of Washington, how many others know? Bringing the Kirov to the Washington annually will make us the only city outside of St. Petersburg to offer regular visits by these great performers. Our annual White Nights in Washington Festival will bring visitors to Washington. It will make us different. So will our Sondheim Festival and our jazz and chamber music programs. But superior programming is not enough. As vital as the message is, it is not the medium. If no one knows that you are working at the highest levels, then you will not be world-class and you will not become a destination. London's theater community is remarkable for its diversity. The Royal Shakespeare Company, the Royal National Theatre, the Almeida, the Donmar Warehouse. These organizations create an excitement that is not easy to duplicate. But so do the Woolly Mammoth, the Signature Theatre, the Arena Stage, and the Shakespeare Theatre here in Washington. What differentiates London's theater community from Washington's? I would argue it has to do with the visibility of these institutions. Ask any American to name key theater cities in the world or even the United States, and you are not likely to hear Washington mentioned. Why? Because Washington arts organizations have not done a very good job of marketing themselves, especially outside of the Beltway. Ask people around the country who are familiar with the performing arts what kind of arts programming comes out of Washington, and most of them will be familiar with the Kennedy Center honors and not much more. And as proud as we are of these awards and the wonderful celebrations that accompany them each year, they are just the tiny glittering tip of the iceberg here. We have been so concerned about selling tickets that we have ignored the institutional marketing that reinforces the work of great arts institutions. We are so busy selling what we do that we forget about selling who we are. When one visits London, one runs to the Royal Shakespeare Company, even if they are performing a lesser-known work. Why? Because we expect a world-class experience at the Royal Shakespeare Company. The Metropolitan Opera, the Kirov, the Bolshoi, the Salzburg Festival have all established great institutional identities. We need to work assiduously to build our visibility. We need to market our organizations nationally and even internationally. And we need to work together to get our city's name into the columns of the arts writers and onto the itineraries of arts travelers. Institutional marketing must become our focus. When you think of London, you think of the Royal Opera, the Royal Ballet, the Royal Shakespeare Company. When you think of New York, you think of the Metropolitan Opera, the Philharmonic, or the New York City Ballet. We need the same kind of instant association with Washington, D.C. and our performing arts institutions. The city can do a great deal to help us achieve this level of renown. The Tourist Bureau can help us create image for our arts groups, but we must do it ourselves as well, with active public relations programs and marketing programs aimed at building national and international identity. If there's anything I have done to help turn around the fortunes of the organizations I have managed, it has been to build institutional identity. When I first arrived at the Alvin Ailey Company, I was startled to receive dozens of letters of condolence on the death of Alex Haley. Too many people thought Alvin Ailey and Alex Haley were the same man. People knew that the Alvin Ailey Company was African American, but they knew little else. A comprehensive marketing strategy involving television appearances, museum exhibitions, books, galas, and huge public performances changed that. We have already started this marketing blitz at the Kennedy Center. In the last 6 weeks, we have inaugurated a huge Latin American arts festival, announced our upcoming British Arts Festival, celebrated the 4th anniversary of our Millennium Stage, revealed our programming for next season, and yes, announced the largest gift in our history, $50 million from Alberto Villar. Each of these announcements and activities received substantial press coverage, and be forewarned, we have just begun. I will not rest until people in this district, this nation, and this world appreciate the full range of art we produce and the extraordinary educational programming we mount in every one of the 50 states. And I will not rest until each artistic venture at the center is appreciated as a unique contribution to the arts in this country. We are not there yet. We have lots to do, but we have ideas and a plan. The Kennedy Center is undergoing a series of renovations, but we must think bigger. The congressionally led proposal to develop the front of the center must be considered seriously. This plan would bring the center into the community rather than leaving it isolated and largely inaccessible. I mentioned that Washington, D.C. has an amazing collection of museums. That is indisputable. But there is one big hole in the numerous offerings in the city, and for that matter, the nation. We have no museum dedicated to the performing arts. There is no place to celebrate our great theater, musical, dance, and performance artists. There are remarkable collections housed at the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress, but we rarely see these collections. I want there to be a new great museum in this city of great museums. In conjunction with the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress, I hope to gain support for the creation of a museum for the performing arts here in Washington. Such a museum filled with sets, scripts, scores, costumes, interactive exhibits, all the lore and history of American theater, music, opera, and dance. Such a museum would indeed create a national performing arts profile for Washington, D.C. And like the other great museums that showcase our history, our technology, and our leaders, this would capture the American spirit in a way that would draw travelers from around the country and the world. And if we do build a mall in front of the Kennedy Center, we would have a campus that would easily house this new museum and would allow us to draw visitors during the daytime and the nighttime. It would immediately put us on the map internationally and provide a physical symbol of the importance this city and this nation places on the performing arts. If we do all of this, strengthen our artistic programming, build on our educational ventures, enhance our visibility, and create important new facilities, I am convinced that we will have created an arts institution that truly fulfills its promise as the National Center for the Performing Arts. And the best news is that good art attracts the resources needed to pay for it. Donors from near and far will support vibrant arts organizations. Over one-half of the £100 million raised to rebuild the Royal Opera House Covent Garden came from foreigners. Great art attracts great philanthropy. I am absolutely confident that we can build the Kennedy Center into a world-class performing arts venue, and I am equally confident that we can attract the resources needed to do so. All we need are ideas and energy and confidence. Thank you.
Well, we have a number of questions here, and this questioner notices that you are sort of used to taking over art institutions that are in trouble, and would like to know what's the difference between taking over a center that's in financial trouble and then coming to the Kennedy Center.
Well, it's absolute delight to come to the Kennedy Center and not spend my day dealing with lines and lines of vendors who are looking for payment. And I can spend my time really thinking about the future, and I think that's what really differentiates a healthy organization from a troubled organization. Since I've arrived at the Kennedy Center, every discussion we've had internally and externally deal with the future, and that's the way it should be with an arts organization. And when you enter a troubled organization, every discussion deals with the past. And so it's extremely gratifying not to have to worry about past problems, past debts, past vendor issues, and be able to focus on the future. And that is the great gift that's been given to me by allowing me to be coming to the Kennedy Center.
What made you choose the Kennedy Center as a place to work as compared going to New York's Lincoln Center or some other institution?
Well, it makes it sound like I was out shopping, which of course I was not. Indeed, I was very, very grateful for the opportunity to talk with the wonderful search committee of the Kennedy Center Board. And in those discussions, I learned how exciting a place the Kennedy Center is already and can be in the future. So for me, it was just a wonderful set of discussions with board members and then eventually with staff members that encouraged me to take this job. But as I say, I'm deeply honored to be here. They had, the search committee had many more choices than I did.
This question would like to know, what do you now envision after a relatively brief time here as the most difficult challenge facing the Kennedy Center?
I think the challenge is just to keep working to keep on improving things. It's too easy to get complacent. You can raise a very large gift and people say, isn't that great? And then you can sit back. Or you can engage the Kira for 10 years and people can say, that's wonderful, and you can sit back. And the problem is that in the arts, you have to keep moving, you have to keep developing. You're never satisfied with quality. You're never sure you have the perfect season. You want to keep building and building. So the challenge for me and for my wonderful staff is to keep working on the future and not to get complacent. That is a problem when arts organizations are fiscally successful, as the Kennedy Center have been. It's very easy to sit back and say, well, everything's going really well, we can just keep riding. And the real challenge is to keep pushing ourselves to try and do better. And what's been wonderful about being able to spend a lot of time with audience members and such in the foyers of the Kennedy Center is there's no shortage of comment and no shortage of opinion about what we should be producing at the Kennedy Center. And it's wonderful to get that input because it does stimulate an awful lot of thinking. And we have to keep working. We will never be done. We will keep working. And long after my tenure, I'm certainly sure that the staff of the Kennedy Center will be trying to improve upon the work I do.
Do you now perceive the programming at the Kennedy Center to be balanced, and do you perceive making any changes in that?
Well, I think you're always striving to achieve a balance. The Kennedy Center is remarkable for the range of art forms we do produce. We go everything from jazz to comedy to classical music to dance, modern dance, ballet, theater. There's such a range, and the balance will never be right for any one goer because everyone's going to want their thing to be focused upon. And my job is to make sure that there is a balance. And does one achieve it? No. One is constantly struggling with where the resources should go. There are limited resources. There are limited financial resources, and there are limited space resources, and there's limited planning time. And so you're constantly trying to find what is the season that reflects what we're trying to do. And it's an ongoing discussion, and I've been here just a few weeks, as you mentioned. I'm very pleased with the season we just announced, and I'm hopeful that in future seasons we'll all be challenging ourselves constantly about that mix between the art forms and the way we make our investments.
This questioner would like to know what do you think can the Kennedy Center do to have more of a national impact?
Well, the Kennedy Center has two very distinct and challenging missions. One is to serve as the main performing arts center in the local region, and the second is to be a true national leader. And one has to address those two missions separately. For the local population, we have an obligation to present a wide range of art forms and a wide range of art. This is where they're going to come to see it, if anywhere, so we have to showcase a great deal. When you start thinking about a national mission, you have to start choosing which areas are we going to lead in. And I think the Kennedy Center has been a remarkable leader in arts education. We currently spend $10 million a year on arts education, making us by far the leading institution in this nation. And we've developed programs that truly address all 50 states in the nation. That is already a leadership activity, and we intend to build upon that leadership activity with more work in the schools, but also with the addition of our VLAR Institute for Arts Management, which is going to give us an opportunity to train young people to do the entrepreneurial arts management that is required to create healthy arts organizations. We also, on the artistic front, want to be creating exciting artistic programs that do truly lead. I think a perfect example of this was the Balanchine Festival housed at the Kennedy Center last autumn. It was a remarkable confluence of arts organizations, of ballet companies from around the world, performing the works of George Balanchine, and it gave a new picture of the work of George Balanchine. That was a true leadership activity. And as we look to the future, we're contemplating several such projects which allow us to create art or to curate art in a way that is new for the nation and allows us truly to claim a leadership role.
I know that the Kennedy Center is involved in educational programs for young children, but can you tell us about this and perhaps how many young children are reached in a year and what it is the Kennedy Center is doing?
Surely. Our estimates are that we're reaching about 5 million children a year in this nation, which is truly just amazing to me. And again, we have both a local and a national role. At the local level, we're working in an in-depth way with the public school children in the Washington, D.C. area. One of the very exciting components of the Sondheim Festival that we're planning for next year will be a performance of the first act of Into the Woods, before the deaths happen, by the children of the middle schools in the Washington, D.C. public school system. These children will work with us to learn how to perform the musical, but they'll also design and build the sets and costumes, and they'll learn how to market the performances. And there's going to be a very in-depth experience in theater for these public school children. That's just one example of many programs that we pursue here in the Washington, D.C. area. As we look nationally, of course, it's not efficient or effective for Kennedy Center to be sending out individuals into every classroom throughout the nation. So we have chosen to look at how we can use our scale, our size, and we've created a series of programs. For instance, the Partners in Education program is a remarkable opportunity for us to work with art centers in 87 different communities around the United States, actually in 46 states. And what we do with those art centers is we teach them how to work with their local public school systems to bring arts into the public schools. so that we are using our experience here in Washington as an example of how to do it in your own community, and we're working actively in 87 communities throughout the United States. We've also created a wonderful website called Arts Edge. What Arts Edge allows teachers to do is to download curricula, teaching plans, to bring the arts into their classrooms, and those curricula are being used throughout the United States today. We also create children's and family productions. Several are in development for next year. I think it's 5 new productions for next year that we will tour around the United States and allow children to have some of their first experiences with the performing arts. These are just a few of the many programs that we have in our education department that I do think truly makes us a leader in this field.
This question would like to know if you think that the Kennedy Center presents enough of American performing arts, or should it be importing more?
My focus is really on bringing the best art to the Kennedy Center. A lot of that best art is American. We have the Alvin Ailey Company every year at the Kennedy Center. We have the Dance Theater of Harlem every year at the Kennedy Center. We have American Ballet Theater every year at the Kennedy Center. And also to look for those great international institutions who also will help to inform and educate our audiences and create the profile of a true national, international house. We can't be afraid to compete. Great arts institutions welcome competition, and so we would like to have the great American art and the great international art at the Kennedy Center.
This questioner asked, what are your plans for developing and producing new work rather than work that has been produced and developed in the past?
It's a very good question, and something that I think is overlooked, and maybe a mark of our ability to market our need to market ourselves better in the future. The Kennedy Center over the last decade or more has been the leading commissioner of new works of art in the world. People don't know that. We commission new scores, symphonic scores, new chamber music scores, new works for theater, new works for dance, than any other organization in the world. We just haven't told you about it. And we're going to start telling you in very big ways. But we do. This National Symphony Orchestra has the wonderful Hechinger program to commission new symphonic works. The Fortis Chamber Music Series commissions new works each year. In our dance program, we commission between 1 and 3 new major dance works each year. This spring, we'll have the world premiere of a new work by Paul Taylor that he's creating for the American Ballet Theater. That'll be part of the American Ballet Theater season here this spring. There's an ongoing relationship between the Kennedy Center and working artists. We just haven't told the story well enough.
I have a couple of questions here that deal with the Kirov Ballet coming to the Kennedy Center. This one asks, of all the great ballet companies in the world, why do you want to position the Kennedy Center with the Kirov? Another one asks, why did you choose the Kirov rather than the Bolshoi?
Both good questions. Well, we didn't choose one over the other. We had the Bolshoi here last year. We're having the Bolshoi here next year. What I did want to do was to establish a relation with Kirov, which is right now, I think, at the height in the world of producing both ballet and opera. And I thought bringing those two side by side would give us a unique view of this remarkable organization, which at this point in time is under the remarkable leadership of Valery Gergiev, who I think is one of the great musical geniuses of our time. And I thought it would be wonderful for the Washington community, and indeed for the American community, to see the work underneath this great genius on a regular basis. This is not to say that anyone else is being excluded. Again, if you look at the Bolshoi, they're here this year, they're here next year. The Cuban Ballet is here next year. We're busy planning many, many appearances by many international and national companies. So it is not that we've chosen the Kirov to be a special place at the expense of others. It's just how wonderful to have the ability to bring this one great organization to this community every year so that we can really get to know them and really get a sense of who these great artists are.
Are there any other plans in the work to cooperate with Russians in exchange of cultural groups?
I know where that question came from. and the answer is, Russia has no monopoly with us, although there's obviously a great deal of wonderful performing arts in Russia. We are working with many countries. This spring, we just had our first year of our Americartes Festival, which focused on the great art of Latin America, and that was the first of several years of programming focusing on Latin America. Our African Odyssey project has been going on for several years and continues next year with a focus on the art of Nigeria, which will include, by the way, again, another new work commissioned of the great choreographer and director George Faison, based on the Nigerian folktale of Queen Amina. So it is certainly not just Russia, although I look at every country and looking for the great art that we can bring in from those nations. I will say that one of the things we will do with Russia, and in fact with many other countries, is to include members, young arts administrators from those nations in our VLAR Arts Management Program. One of the ideas behind this program, this institute, is to try and bring in some very, very talented young arts administrators, not just from the United States, but from around the world, and teach them how they can go back into their home countries and run their arts organizations successfully. This is very, very important right now in the world. We actually live in a very blessed situation in this country because our arts funding environment, as challenging as it's been and as many changes as we saw 20 years ago, we're not seeing that change right now. We're living in a relatively stable time for arts funding. But if you go around the world, if you go to Central Europe or Western Europe even, if you go to Africa, if you go to Asia, what you're seeing is a very, very dramatic change in the way the arts organizations are funded. That is the system whereby the government would give virtually all the money needed to fund these arts organizations is starting to erode. It's very difficult for the governments in Germany or Italy or France or South Africa or Japan to justify giving the subsidies to arts organizations that are as large as they have been traditionally. And as a result, throughout the world, the major arts organizations, many of the ones whose names we know so well, are threatened because they don't know how to find new resources. And one of my goals with the VLAR Institute is to train certainly American young people, but also international young people who can go back to the countries that we love to visit so well and to actually run their organizations, create new resources, and ensure the future health of their organizations.
You've talked eloquently about the programs at the Kennedy Center and what you're going to do. But I have a number of questions here that are a little more basic. For example, will you improve parking at the Kennedy Center? Do you have any plans to expand parking? The lack of parking is a problem. And then one more that you might want to deal with at the same time. How soon will you improve the cafe restaurant at the center? And have you eaten there?
Yes, I've eaten there. The parking situation obviously is serious. It's been made more serious because the Watergate across the street has closed a whole bunch of their parking, so it's gotten worse, not better. But the plans have been underway for quite a while, and this June we should break ground on new parking facilities, which should be completed in 2 years' time. That will add approximately 750 new spaces to our parking garages and should seriously eat into that specific problem. But I think there's a larger problem at work here, which is the problem of physical accessibility to the center. I live just about 15-minute walk away from the Kennedy Center, and I do walk to the Kennedy Center, not drive, and it is indeed a challenge to cross all the streets and do it safely. And part of the reason why I'm so anxious to see the proposal that has come out of Congress, to see that proposal for the development of the front of the center to really become realized, is that it would allow people to walk safely from the mall, from the Lincoln Memorial actually, to the Kennedy Center without dodging any traffic. And I think anything we can do to bring the arts more into the community, make them more accessible so you don't have to drive to the Kennedy Center, I think would be an advantage. But to those who are driving cars, we are adding parking spaces. We have our shuttle bus that takes you from the metro stop to the Kennedy Center, and we are working as fast as we can on that. On the restaurants front, I have eaten there. We are renovating a portion of our restaurants this summer and the remainder of them next summer. So by a year from this September, the entire restaurant situation should be taken care of.
That's good news. Do you think Washington has unique theater tastes? Or if it plays in Des Moines, will it also play here in Washington?
Well, I've spent a lot of time looking at the kind of work we do and looking at who comes and how many people come to the vast array of performances we give at the Kennedy Center. And what is interesting to me is how sophisticated the tastes of Washingtonians are, which I think is not what I was led to expect when I was being interviewed for the job or when people started talking to me at Washington. And I have to say that living here 16 years ago and moving away, I've come back to a city that is much, much more cosmopolitan in its taste than the city I left in 1985. I see a hunger and a thirst and an interest in a wide range of work. That work can run anywhere from the gamut from a very avant-garde theater piece, like a piece called Spoon-Faced Steinberg, we're bringing over from England this spring, which is a one-woman show written by Lee Hall, who is the writer, Oscar-nominated writer of Billy Elliot, so buy your tickets. That's on one side. And the other side, we have Beauty and the Beast coming this summer, which attracts also a large audience. Again, as the local center, I think we have an obligation to showcase a great range of work. But I find the tastes of Washingtonians to be very sophisticated and very, very diverse. And I found the exact same thing to be true in London or in New York or in Kansas City.
It seems that this questioner is a little concerned about the sound system at the Millennium Stage, because they ask that they like the stage, but the sound system is a little lacking, and they want to know if the acoustics could be made a little better for them.
The Millennium Stage is truly a remarkable project. We have had 850,000 people enjoy free performances at the Kennedy Center over the last 4 years, and that is truly astonishing, and it's something that we're very proud of. The Millennium Stages were added to a hallway in which obviously it was not considered to be a theater when it was first built, and we're constantly trying to find ways to improve the quality of the performances, the sound systems, etc. on the stage. And I think we're going to keep working at that endeavor. But let's keep in mind that we have had 850,000 people enjoy performances, many of whom would not have been able to come to a performance otherwise. And maybe this is the first spark they have of interest in the performing arts, and I think that's a huge accomplishment.
I have a couple questions here about your suggestion of the National Museum for the Performing Arts. One question would like to know where it might be located. Another wants to know how it would be funded, and questions whether or not you think that the Congress and President Bush and the Bush administration might be willing to appropriate money to do so.
Well, there's a whole plan that, again, came out of Congress in a study that was conducted by the Department of Transportation, which I think will be released any day now, we hope, which suggests that it would be, again, a wonderful thing to develop the front of the Kennedy Center, essentially sinking the highways that are in front and building a mall over them, which would give the room to add some buildings, one of which I think could easily house this museum that I'm proposing. Where the money will come from, I think, like most things in the arts, it'll be a public-private partnership. And that has worked so well at the Kennedy Center, and I think will continue to work in the future. I believe that we can find the private funds to build the museum and to operate the museum. I think we'll need the public funds to help us develop that whole mall project and to work on the highways in front. So I think it would be a mixed source of revenue for that project. But is the money out there? Absolutely. I am astonished every day by how much money is available to the arts. We're all astonished by the great wealth that exists out in this nation, and I have found that if you create an exciting project, people will give you the money. And I'll give you a short example. We announced our Sondheim project last Thursday at a press conference, and yesterday a gentleman from New York who has never been to the Kennedy Center called us up and offered us a check for a very substantial sum to help us sponsor the Sondheim project. We had never heard of him, he had never been to us, but it was a project that excited him. And I am convinced that exciting art attracts money and attracts audiences, and so I don't worry about that we will find the money. I know we can do that.
This questioner wants to know that other than the Kennedy Center Heroes, or Honors, excuse me, do you see more television programs emanating from the Kennedy Center, such as a daily or weekly talk show?
Wouldn't that be nice? I'd love that. We are talking about more television. We already do a substantial amount of television. We have our Mark Twain Awards. We have the Honors. There have been several programs. There's a long series about dance. I think it's 5 shows or 4 shows that will be aired this June. But it's been too episodic, and I would like to do more. And we have entered into conversations with various networks about how to bring more television exposure to the Kennedy Center. And to be honest, I would like to bring more television exposure in those areas which really could be educational and which really reflect what goes on at the Kennedy Center year-round. Not just performances, although it's wonderful to have performances shown, but I think also how interesting it would be to have a television show, for instance, that followed Suzanne Farrell around as she trains young dancers, as she does each summer at the Kennedy Center. It would be so educational to see how this great ballerina imparts her knowledge to young dancers. Or wouldn't it be interesting to see how one of our young Vilar Institute scholars learns arts management and actually maybe goes back to his or her home state, city, or country to practice? There's so many opportunities to bring television into the work we do. We're starting those discussions now. My experience with television is that it takes a good long time. I have to say my second day at the Royal Opera House, I entered into a long series of negotiations with the BBC about bringing much more opera house performances onto television and radio, and it took me 2 years, literally to the day, to get the contract signed. So these are very, very lengthy, difficult procedures, but we are starting on them now, and I promise you that in less than 2 years we'll have some good results.
So what are the essential differences between European and American arts management?
Ooh, I could do an hour on that. I would say the press, but I know where I'm sitting. The central difference has to do with arts funding, and all the issues that relate to the press and relate to the audience and ticket prices and all the challenges of running arts organizations in Europe relate to the funding differences. In this country, it's extremely clear how arts get funded. We get very modest amounts from the government, we get a good amount from our ticket sales, and we have to raise the difference privately. And that's been the system for 100 years, and that's how we've all learned to function. In the European capitals, the continental capitals, the government will give somewhere between 60% and 70% of the budget to arts organizations. It's wonderful in some respects. The ticket prices can be low, there's very little pressure to do private fundraising, and you have a great deal of artistic flexibility because you're not so worried about your ticket revenue, so you can produce what you'd like. And that's why so much of the very, very avant-garde art has come out of European arts organizations in the last 20 and 30 years. There's a problem attached to this, though. Number one, the arts organizations sometimes lose touch with their audiences and produce art that is so avant-garde the audience doesn't want to go. And if you go into many of the German regional opera houses, or even some of the ones in Berlin on any given night, you won't see them sold out. You'll see them half empty. But the biggest problem is that governments change their minds, and politics change. And if you live in a system where you depend upon the government for virtually all of your support, and then all of a sudden the government decides it's going to give less to the arts, you all of a sudden have a big problem. And that is a situation today in Europe. In England, where I worked, it's a hybrid situation. The English funding system is more like like the European capitals, continental Europe, than it is the United States, in that the government gives a lot more than the US, but it gives a lot less than in Europe. I'll give you an example. The Royal Opera House got £20 million a year, or roughly $30 million a year, from the government as an annual subsidy. That's huge compared to American opera houses. On the other hand, the Paris Opera gets 3 times as much from its government. So as a result, in England, you're in this very uncomfortable situation. You're getting a very substantial amount from the government, therefore the press and the public demand a good deal from you, and they want low ticket prices, but you're not getting enough to really pay your bills, so you at the same time have to embark upon very substantial private fundraising, and you also have to have higher ticket prices than you would in Paris or in Rome or in Vienna. So you get in trouble on both sides. On the one hand, the press and the public want more, and on the other hand, you don't have the money to deliver it. And so it's a very, very challenging environment in which to work. It's so much easier back here. I'm so happy to be home.
Well, in that light, a number of questioners would like to know how the city has changed since you were last here. What differences do you see in Washington now?
Well, certainly I see an explosion on the arts scene. I think it is true that we now have more professional theaters in Washington, D.C. than any other city in the nation. That's really quite extraordinary and wonderful. But I think the biggest difference from my standpoint is that we've seen develop much more of a permanent population and of a permanent corporate base here. And that corporate base brings people who care deeply that this city, that this district, really fulfills all the needs that we expect from our hometown. And that means that we want to invest more in our arts organizations and our educational institutions than we might have in the past. And so I see a great expansion in the number of people who want to participate actively in the arts world here. And that, of course, makes my life that much easier.
This questioner notes that London has had an arts tradition for centuries, New York for at least a century or more, and the Kennedy Center is only 30 years old. Other than the passage of time, what can be done to establish deeper traditions for Washington?
It's a good question. It was one actually that I was asked when I went to London. One of the journalists who interviewed me said, well, you know, you're coming from a city, New York, where where the organizations are so young compared to ours here in London, you know, aren't you daunted? And I had to remind him that the Royal Opera was only formed in 1946 and was half the age of the Metropolitan Opera, and is younger than the National Symphony Orchestra substantially, as is the Royal Ballet. So I think what we have to see is the arts world has changed very dramatically over the last 200 years. And many of the institutions that we think are so venerable, many of them are quite young. And the way you develop the institutional identity, the way you develop the feeling that they're old, is just to have huge quality. And the more quality we can bring, the more quality we can produce, the more people will feel like these are institutions of weight and substance. And that's really what we think about when we think about arts institutions, not the year that they were founded.
In your address, you emphasized marketing as a critical point of selling the Kennedy Center. So this questioner wants to know, is marketing the arts like other marketing? In other words, does sex also sell performing arts?
The short answer is yes. But it's a very good question. Marketing in the performing arts is not very different from marketing other products. The good thing that we have going for us in marketing the arts is that we have an entire section of the newspaper devoted to us, whereas the entire rest of the commercial sector only has one section. So we have an advantage that we have many writers who work writing about us on a daily basis. Now, sometimes one can feel that's not such a great thing, particularly when one works in London. But it is actually to our advantage, and the press can be extremely helpful in getting one's message across. In terms of images, you talked about sex. I have my own particular theories about images. We typically in the arts make a big mistake in the images we use to sell our performances. We typically, if you're working in an arts organization, you pick that picture that you like the best. My favorite example had to do with the Martha Graham Company, where the most beautiful pictures were taken of Martha wrapped up in Halston fabric, screaming in agony. They're actually beautiful works of art. They just don't happen to sell any tickets to dance performances. You can love them if you love the Graham Company, but if you're trying to market to people who may never have been there before, they're pretty daunting. And so I tend to use, yes, since our ballet audiences are typically about 60% women, men up in the air tend to sell much better than women on tutus.
Good to know. This questioner might like to become involved in the Kennedy Center and asked, what advice would you give someone who wants to become involved in it? Are there committees for them to join, or what can they do?
Absolutely. We have a very active volunteer program. I would invite you to call the Kennedy Center or to visit our website. Let me plug our website, which is truly one of the extraordinary arts websites in the world. I mentioned the Millennium Stage before. What you might not know is that every day this free 6 o'clock performance is available for free on your computer at the Kennedy Center website. It is there in its entirety. Our website has backgrounds on every performance we give. It has a huge amount of information. It also allows you to personalize the information we send you about the art forms you care about. But if you're interested in volunteering, please either visit our website or give us a call, and we would be very, very happy to talk with you. We have a very, very important group of volunteers. Several of them are here today. We're extremely appreciative of their efforts, and it helps us run the center much more efficiently.
This questioner notes that my friends and I enjoy the film shown at the American Film Institute at the Kennedy Center, but worry that the Institute might be squeezed out by the Woolly Mammoth Theater. Will you work to keep the AFI in the Kennedy Center?
It's a very good question, and I should say that the American Film Institute has chosen to build a new facility for itself outside of the Kennedy Center. It was that decision on their part that encouraged us to fill the time that they were not filling with performances by both the Woolly Mammoth and the African Continuum Theater. We will, I think, to get to the heart of the question, we will continue to have a film presence at the Kennedy Center, and what we're thinking about now is how to do that best. And absolutely, film is a key art form in this nation. We have to recognize film at the Kennedy Center. We're now developing our plans. With the departure of AFI, we're developing our plans for how we are going to address this very important art form.
Thank you. And before I ask the last question, I would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation for your appearance today at the National Press Club.
Thank you very much.
And a famous National Press Club mug, which can be used for any number of things, including coffee. And it will be. Put that at your desk at the Kennedy Center. two questions. One is someone wants to know what the web address is for the website. And secondly, you have had a history of not staying too long at any one of your last few places. And this question would like to know, how long do you plan to stay at the Kennedy Center?
The website address is http://www.kennedy-center.org. That is our website. Someone once asked me as I was interviewing, can't you hold a job? And the truth is, I hope I can. Mr. Johnson, in his wisdom, forced me to sign the first employment contract in my life. So I have a 5-year contract. I hope to be able to extend it many years beyond it. I can't think of any challenge greater than running the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Thank you.
Mr. Kaiser. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today. And I'd also like to thank the National Press Club staff members, Melinda Cook, Pat Nelson, Joanne Booz, Melanie Abdel-Dermot, and Howard Rothman for organizing today's lunch. Also, thanks to the NPC Library for the research. We are adjourned. Thank you.